Hey friends, Jeff here with a new episode of Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. Today we welcome to the show Mark McDonough. Mark is the CEO at ChromaCode, where they are enabling genomic solutions around things like lung cancer diagnostics and transplant rejection technology. They're up to some really exciting things. Mark has been a CEO for over a decade. And as you'll hear in this conversation, he has developed a reflective and a fulfillment-focused approach to both his work and his life and how he leads. Who Mark is to me is the simple word real. He is authentic and real. He brings his heart to work, his passion, his enthusiasm, and his energy. And he's open about the good and the bad, the challenging and the not so challenging. I think you're really going to love this conversation with Mark McDonough. Mark McDonough, welcome to the show. Really excited to have you this morning.
Oh, thanks so much. Looking forward to talking with you, Jeff.
Awesome. So I just did a quick introduction of you and who you are to me. Would love for you to share with us what you're up to in the world these days.
Yeah, I know. On a personal front, just very involved with my family's events. They're very important to me, and providing a better life for each of my three children is really important to me. And in some ways, my weekends are pretty boring because it's very child focused. And then what we're up to in the world, I really enjoyed leading this company and ChromaCode. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing there, I think, later in the show. But our goal is to continue to build, leveraging our technology to build fast, affordable tools. And without just making this a pitch for the company, it's really what that is what I'm up to in this world. Is we're focused on taking a emerging company to the next steps, and we're kind of at a critical juncture over the next 12 to 15 months with a number of proof points that we're really excited about, that we think could make a profound impact in both the world of lung cancer and then in some other monitoring assays for both cancer and transplant rejection. So job keeps me busy. And the family keeps me busy, but it's a fulfilling life. So that's kind of what I'm up to today, and going forward. And then we have in a couple of weeks, I have a couple of cool conferences that I'm going to that I'm excited about. One with a number of CEOs in biotech, and then we have a big trade show for the company that we're really jazzed about coming up in early November, where we're going to have a platform presentation. So a lot of good stuff cooking.
I'm wondering, you said the word fulfillment, and I'm wondering, you've been around the block, so to speak, as the saying goes, for a long time, or a lot of times around the block. At what point did fulfillment matter to you?
That's a really awesome question, man. Honestly, I'm going to give you credit for that, because on my way up, I'll be very honest, I was ambitious. In that there's a lot of great with ambition, but there's also some sides that you just have to rough out your edges over time. And there's some things that I probably on my way up where it was just about succeeding, not necessarily trying to get the next rung, but making President's Club, being top 10% as a sales rep, all these things that were kind of me, if you will, even though they benefited the company and the patients we served. And, you get to a point, and it's just part of, I think, God's grace, or I don't want to be really, but for me, we believe in that. I think it's part of just as you get wiser, you start realizing, yes, it's really important that you have a success in life, because if you do the right things with that, it can cascade down to your family and to your company's families and everything, and have a generational impact, which is awesome. But there's other things too that really matter. And I think, for anyone who's a mom or a dad, they just realize, that the thing you want more than anything is your children to be happy. And so, you're often fulfilled when they're satisfied, and you have gaps or pain when they're struggling, whether it be health or just school or something, or just relationships. So, and then for work, it's fulfilling to us when we're successful, and it's, the older I've gotten, it's more fun. As people have often said, at Christmas time, it's more fun to give than to receive. I find it more fun as I get older, and, I'm being in a position of authority for the last 10 years when we give credit and you see people's faces when they realize it's their hard work that built the company to success. And I get fulfilled when, I see teammates and things like that who really work their tail off to get us to a certain point, get recognized for that, either financially or with accolades and things like that. So fulfillment has become a bigger thing, because you can have, you see a lot of super wealthy and super successful people who live really an empty, miserable life, right? And it's because they're trying to fill some gap that they can't seem to find to fill with whatever. And while my life's no means perfect, don't get me wrong, I think being fulfilled in certain aspects of it's really important. So that's a part of personal and in business world.
Yeah, I really appreciate you shining a light on that. And I'm always curious about, well, I'll set the context. I was coaching a client yesterday who is mentoring a number of people in his company. He's CIO in this company. And he was asking me how to help his mentees see the way in the bigger picture, like fulfillment, meaning, purpose, people, which all are things in some way that you just pointed to. And we talked about some things, but I'm curious, as you've matured and you've grown and seeing the bigger picture of things, you brought the name God into the conversation. As you have grown in your perspective, how do you help those that you see within your company or maybe in your network that are asking for your advice, that want your mentorship? How do you help them see the way in that? Is it just time? If we just smile and nod and say, yeah, they'll figure it out eventually? Or is there something that you specifically do to help bring people along in that way of thinking?
I would say, number one, it's the thing that you just said, which is they need to ask, because I will also say, we're all busy, and you can't, I find it very difficult to be all things to all people. What I mean by that is, I was a much better sales rep when I was 30 with no children, where I literally would work 85 hours a week, and just had no other distractions. And so that was something, that I was able to do. So where I'm going with the mentorship is people need to ask for it, because I think even in a company like ours, it's smaller, we're 65 people, but I'm not going to just go in and invade people's privacy and say, hey, look, here's an area I see as a gap, and I'm going to come and give you advice. Number one, I think it's condescending. Number two, it's just, you need people to ask. So number one, they need to be vulnerable enough to do that and say, hey, I'd love to do this either in a formal or informal setting, in which case, yes, I would make the time for them. But there is a part of what you're saying. And number one, it's, I think the first thing I try to do when I mentor someone is tell them where I fell short, because then they see your human side. They obviously respect you. You don't want to diminish your own authority, because if you're in a mentorship role, there's a reason why people are asking for it, because you've had some success or you have some knowledge. So I'm not trying to take away any of my credibility there, but I do want people to learn, like, hey, like I mentioned, when I was on my way up and I was leading people, sometimes I think there was really only one way to success. And I learned that over time. You know what? People can have all different styles and can be successful. And I learned it luckily early enough in my first CEO gig, and I really incorporated a mastermind philosophy where everyone had input and could say their piece, because I often found that even if people say their piece, as long as you set the expectation with them, we have to come to one decision. Not every recommendation you guys make is going to be taken. But as long as people understood with maturity, okay, well, at least it's cathartic that I got my point out there and my point of view is being heard. If we don't decide on that, I understand. So I kind of learned along the way, that you have to listen to people and seek to understand first. And I still have a long way to go, by the way, on listening and just, taking in what people say. But that's when I mentor people, I would say, hey, one of the first things you're doing if you're in a position of leadership is walk the walk. You have to be committed to do the things that you're asking teammates and friends to do, or else it could be hypocritical, and then you really lose people because no one likes a hypocrite. And then number two, when they lean on you for an answer, you have to make that decision, which is also a position. Sometimes I like to get everyone's opinion, but they still look to me. I've also noticed, and you may have too, Jeff, there's a lot of people who just literally want to come in, do the best they can, and be told what to do. Like literally, I don't need to make all the decisions at work. They want to know what's our strategy, what do they need to do to execute on it, and they don't want to make the decision or have the responsibility for the decision. They want to just. So for those people to mentor them, it's okay. Let me give you the structure and the game plan so that you feel fulfilled doing your job, even though you're not making any of the decisions up at the top, right? So that's it, and that's kind of the third thing would be is when you're leading someone is just realize everyone's different individually and motivated different ways. So asking questions like, hey, as I'm mentoring you, what would you like to improve first so we can figure that out? And then secondly, like when you're mentoring your teammates, make sure you know what do they like to do and are good at, and where do they feel there's gaps that they need help before we start assuming things. And that's another area I still need to work on too, is you got to always assume great intent, right? You can't assume that what's happening. And I think in our personal relationships, when we've been with people a long time, we'll sometimes assume something. It may not always be the best thing, and it could totally be not true, right?
Yeah.
So I think that applies to work and mentorship too, so it's hopefully that's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering at the stage, you pointed to a few exciting things in the next 12 months of what's coming for ChromaCode. Leadership tends to be, and I'm a guy who teaches and coaches around leadership, but it tends to be painted with a very broad brush of this is what you need to do to be a good leader, great leader maybe. But I'm wondering, to bring it very specific into the season that you are in and leading at ChromaCode, what are either the things you're, from a leadership perspective, character perspective, either you're hiring for or you're developing specifically for what is required today and in this season at ChromaCode?
Yeah, we were just talking about this as an executive team yesterday because we read we all read a management book by a couple former SEALs, and they called Extreme Ownership, and in the book there's a number of key points, but one of the key points was believing and empowering. So, in order to achieve goals for your team, it can't just be 3 execs or 3 of the senior military members or the head coach on a football team and the assistant coach who believes. It's like you need to describe the why of what you're doing to all the people and then include them in the why of like, hey, is this resonating? What do you think? What input do you have on our mission? And let's incorporate that. So then people feel bought in on the why, and then empowered to kind of help make the why better. Like, why are we doing this? What are we trying to build? Okay, we're trying to build this, leveraging our software. We're trying to build amazing assays for lung cancer and for transplant rejection. Okay, now do we believe? Got you on the why. People are, and there's 65 people, so maybe 1 or 2 aren't bought in. We're trying to do our best to get everyone, but we got the team moving in the right direction on the why. Now, do we believe we're going to have success, and do we have the resources? And so that's kind of the things that we're really focused on. We'll have our all hands today, and the team's pretty honest about how they're feeling about the company. And we're not all 10s, and it's been a company that's been here 5 years, right? So we just pivoted to the genomics a year ago. We got some really smart software people who've been here for 4 years, and they've seen a couple different iterations of the company. So I want them bought in. I'm not saying, hey, if you're questioning where we're going, I don't need you. That's not the right answer. These are smart people who have stayed here because they believe we're doing something great, but they still have questions. So we got to keep getting them on. And I turn it around on them too, especially the really good ones. I'm like, hey, you're not this isn't like you're a passive bystander. Like, if we kick ass, it's because you make it kick ass. And if we fail, it's not just the senior exec team fails. It's we didn't get there as a team. We failed, And so trying to pull that down where some of the responsibility goes down, but it's also the empowerment of when we win, it's because you guys, right? And so I think that's those are some of the things that we're trying to do as we get to these we have a few technical milestones we're working to achieve in the next 6 months. We're doing some commercial milestones on our first assay that are combining technical and commercial over the next 6 months that are really important for us. And then at the same time, with the help of our partners like, Russo on this call, is we're also really letting people know who the company is, because they don't really know who ChromaCode is really in this genomics iteration. And it's exciting. And so we're trying to really make sure we're getting that word out through both social media as well as trade shows, et cetera. But it's about, getting everybody on board and then, you may have to make, it's not like we want to make changes, but if you do have people who just can't get there, then we just, it's not the right place for them, and that's fine too, and we just move on in that direction and try to find with new talent who can, jump in and believe. And there's one other thing I'll take you from that book, though, that I read, because it's really important for accountability at the senior level, is they say there's no bad teams, there's only bad leaders. And that's what they would feel like. Okay, when a Marine Corps mission or a SEAL team mission met, it's not like your team sucked, it's that you as the platoon commander, you failed, no one else. So it's not your team failed you, and it's just like in sports, when you hear a head coach blaming his players, it's just a bad situation, right? Like, if the team fails, head coach should own it, right? So that's really important, I think.
Yeah. And I love the link that you just made between extreme ownership and accountability. Accountability is I don't even know how to describe it.
It's a very loose and overused word, right?
Yeah. So what's a better word? Maybe it's extreme ownership. Maybe that's the phrase. If we steal from those guys, is that really the better way to convey what you're after, whether it be your senior teams, down a little deeper in the organization? Is extreme ownership, is that a better phrase than accountability?
I'll leave that to, I don't want to be so presumptuous as like I'm the authority on this. I mean, all this stuff though, it's like we have gaps, right? So I'll talk about accountability, extreme ownership. Then I'll get, and I won't call it an argument, but I'll get in a discussion with my wife and I'm being defensive on stupid crap. Like, I'm not owning it at home. You know what I mean? On something. And so it's just, it's kind of like my motto, as you saw, which isn't original. I've said, but I mean, I didn't take it from him, but I thought I made it up, but I don't think it's original. I think a lot of people have it, which is, seek perfection and settle for excellence. I think there's a lot of things like with accountability, as long as I think accountability is fundamentally like, can my team under me trust me that I'm going to do the right thing for the company in an ethical way, where I'm trying to make the best, not trying, because trying is weak, that I'm making the best decisions with the best information I have at the time. That can for sure be critiqued later as whether they're right or wrong. But do I trust that? Do I trust my own team? Do I have the right leadership in place? Do they trust the people next to them? That's kind of the best. accountability is almost trust, and then it should lead to ownership. But like I say, I'll then fall short in, personal, really, because you have something you're trying to protect, right? And you'll defend yourself instead of just owning, you know what, that was my fault. I should have done that. So I think, and with accountability, I think if you're achieving 90%, that's great, honestly, because that's just something it's very hard to be, no matter what walk of life, personal, work, whatever, to be 100% accountable all the time. That's a special type of cat. That's not easy because we're all human.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's an undertone of what you're saying is that of what you're striving to create, imperfect as it may be, but what I sense is what you're trying to create is safety. Is that safety to go for it, safety to own it, safety to go for that 90% or whatever percent you're going for, but it's safe. Like I can mess up. Obviously,
yeah. You want to have that.
Messing up is not the same as incompetence, but yeah, I sense that
environment. No, I think you're exactly right, and I don't want to say that wasn't here before me. It may have been. So because I don't feel like the team was, beaten or anything like that when I came here, but we definitely want to create that because we're not being melodramatic, but with the tests we're building, that we are pioneering, and so with that, we're going to bloody our nose along the way when we have success. And I don't want, I wouldn't want the board to come to me on every time you take a chance or make a decision and it falls short to be, really punished for that, because then what does that train you to do? You take less chances, or you're less honest. You still take the chances, you just don't tell anybody. That's right. So those are the two things. So when you build a safer environment where people can take risks, you can't not hold people accountable. Like if we don't learn from it and we just say, hey, that's okay, man, don't worry about it. Or if we blow things off, that's not right either. It's just, hey, look, okay, we all supported this. That's, I think, also key is, we all supported this, so we can't hindsight it like I didn't support this if it didn't go well. So we all supported this. You may have been the leader of the project. Is there anything you learned from it? And then, one of the cliches I really like is bad news doesn't get better with time, right? So when we know there's going to be an issue, let's bring it up in the forefront, because as long as I have expectations set, then I can tell the board or the public, we're not public here, thankfully, but the outside world something and set the right expectation, then you can manage something. It's when surprises happen. That's when, if anything here, we'll hold someone accountable and be like, hold on, why are we not telling the truth along the way when we're trying to have an environment where we have to pioneer and take some chances, and we know that it doesn't mean we're always going to be successful. We want to be successful, and we want it to be well thought out, but when it's not, we're not firing people unless you do something egregious where you put someone in harm's way or you're misrepresenting the company. That's a different story, right? So yeah, we do want the people to have the opportunity to lead and to charge, because otherwise the opposite of safety, the other definition of safety is, we're not at a stage as an organization where we can make safe chance. We're not a big company that keeps turning out revenue because we have a machine that we're profitable no matter what. You see this in big companies, and I'm not going to name any, but you just see people just want to hold their job and go to meetings all day, because the machine's rolling. And so they're not going to make any risky decisions. All right. There. So for us, kind of the double meaning of safety is it's a safe place to make decisions, but we can't make just safe decisions. We have to kind of make decisions that'll propel the company forward over the next year.
Yeah, I love that distinction between those two aspects or definitions of the word safety. I'm curious because you have deadlines, you have targets that you're shooting for.
Yeah.
People have expectations.
Yeah.
And you're a pioneering scientific-based organization where stuff works, stuff doesn't. I had one scientist at a client tell me, I wish they would appreciate more the the imperfection of this process that we try something, it doesn't work. So how in a demand-driven world of investment and boards and expectations, how do you manage all of that also and also be a pioneering, scientifically oriented organization?
Yeah. So good question. So I think number one, you really need to think out very well your goals for the year. So kind of what's been good for us is a North Star is we have corporate goals that we do on a 12-month basis. And when you are like us, very dynamic, 12 months could be considered a long time, but it's still something we can't come off. So what we do to try to align everybody on it is everyone on the team. So we have 65 people. Will have the corporate goals, and then each person's personal goals, because every single person in the company has like a salary or something, and then they have an opportunity for a bonus, some smaller than others, and they're all tied to 50-50 on personal performance that their supervisor and them agree to, and then company goals. So we try to get everyone on board with the company goals. That way we build a sense of accountability of here's how we're tracking. And so we promulgate that at the all hands meeting every month, and we show how we're doing to those goals. And they can be a North Star. And by November, December, with a company like us, it's fast. You could look at a couple of them and say, okay, are those staler because we pivoted, and did this? Yes. And then it's up to me in February when we go to bonus with the board, if it's something that we didn't achieve. If I feel genuinely like, okay, we tabled this because of strategy, I try to get some sort of compensation for that, whether it's not 100%, but something. And our board's very, very reasonable, right? So they want to make it motivational. Yet if we have a rough year, of course you should have it be punitive. But thankfully we're not there. Then secondarily, so you have the corporate goals, I think really help people on the accountability front, as well as we do Gantt charts and sprints and track. And so, for example, software team, they're very proud of like hitting each sprint, right? And then they'll report that out. So they kind of have self-accountability and then report out. But then on the flip side of that, to your point, is we give ourselves free rein to pivot. So while even in our corporate goals, for example, transplant rejection was on there and on our roadmap, it's really become an incredible focus for us the last 6 months, because we see an opportunity to be really disruptive in that space. And that learning has happened for kind of all of us, including me, where I was bought in because my chief commercial officer, who's very, very sharp, she was convinced of this back in February, and we put it on our roadmap. But now just with the research she's done with our team, and then talking to over 50 doctors, and just like, wow, this is real, and what we can do actually is a great application of our technology to help. So that'd be an example of a goal that's 20% in our corporate goals. It's now become I wouldn't say it's everything, but it's a big chunk of our where we can drive really incredible revenue for the company in the next 5 years will come from this product. So we're really focused and excited about it. So that'd be a pivot where, hey, now we're holding ourselves accountable. And I'll give an example without sharing too much. We've had a couple things slide to the right. And all we have to do is, hold ourselves accountable. The guys don't like coming in and explaining to the team that they moved something to the right. But we don't just beat them up. We ask why, how do we rectify it? When's the real delivery date? Because it's not just looking in the past of what went wrong, but okay, when are we going to have it ready?
Right.
And that type of thing. And those are situations that happen, quite a bit when you're trying to create something new.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thanks for that perspective. I want to shift just slightly and reframe the name of the show and get your perspectives. Name of the show is Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having, or maybe not having enough, or need to have more of. Yeah. When you hear me name the show, what's the first thing that comes to mind with that phrase for you? Conversations life science leaders aren't having. but should be?
Well, I mean, each one of us would be like, how do I manifest the value of our company better, right? So if you look at where my buddies run, and I'm going to see a bunch of them in 2 weeks, and not everyone's going to come into, especially the public company, you're not coming into this with their chest out. I mean, many of these companies are at all-time lows right now in market cap, and so I think one of the conversations we may even have, honestly, but that we're not having is, how do we collectively get the investor and shareholder community excited about putting money into these things again, and what do we have to change? Because for the last 5 years, a lot of the companies that are really struggling now, including one of the companies I sold a company to, thankfully at a higher price point, is high burns. They thought the days if you can just grow the top line and burn a lot of money and not have repercussions. Well, all that's come to roost in the last 18 months, right? And you'll see a lot of the healthcare public company, they're down 30 to 50%. And so I think the conversation we need that we may not be having is, how do we restore confidence as an industry? Each company will have their own, but how do we, as in diagnostic space, for example, how do we restore confidence across the board in that? And then maybe the second one, which could be more investor specific, is what exactly are investors looking for? Because they're, as you probably know, with the VCs, they're open, but they're not always, they don't tell you everything, So one of the things I'll always ask when we talk to investors, and we have another call today, is, what's kind of right down the fairway? And I'm not even a golfer, but whatever you'd like to say, like, what's a really ideal investment look like? And then what's an investment you'd make in this market, even it's not the ideal criteria, but there's a hot button, or two. And so those are some of the conversations I'm not probably having with the investors. I will. And then I would say on the healthcare system, it's certainly how do we get confidence going again in markets across the board, and then that might tailor into specific conversations company by company, where I've just got to figure out how to cut my and how do you cut your costs without affecting humans' lives, and and just doing a rote personnel cut, right? Those are things. How can we be more efficient? I think those are things that are really kind of on my mind, and I'm sure they're on a lot of the other men and women's mind who are running companies.
So you mentioned the conferences, seeing colleagues, buddies. So if you were to, over coffee or a beer, whatever beverage you choose, that if you were going to talk about one of those three, like, what's that conversation going to be like?
Yeah, I think I might just ask people, like, what are you doing? Because there's going to be some similar things each company. So for example, we're private, so I don't want to share too much, but we're not yet profitable, and we're venture backed, right? So I need to secure more investment because we have great things coming down the road, but we need time and money to get there, right? And that's not too dissimilar from some of the other companies. And just be like, is there anything outside the box? Like, tell me any creative ideas you're doing to make your burn last long, to manage your cash better. That would be like a question I'd ask somebody, because they might have something novel that you'd think they're all pretty basic. Oh, you manage your expenses, you have to grow your revenues, you can get out exterior funding, but they might come up with like, oh, well, I found this one fund who particularly likes to do these, and then it's all on the back end. You have to pay them. Nothing's free, right? But then in 2 years' time, we pay them this, and it's actually an affordable investment. So there could be something like that I haven't thought about. But that's, as you can tell, kind of for us, it's we believe in our story big time. Like, we're not trying to figure out our strategy. So for me, the alligator closest to the boat is, okay, securing the funding to get that chunk of investment so we can do the things that we really want to do. Mm-hmm. And it's just not as easy to say, oh, you just go to your current investors and do it, because each investor has their own, they've been with the company X amount of time and they have their own roadmap, so that's just one of those things.
Yeah. there's I love your honesty about all of it. Your shortcomings as you came up, and even the challenges you're facing right now. Again, sensitive to who's listening, and wanting to maintain a sense of authority and leadership. How do you balance that whole idea of vulnerability as a CEO? I mean, it's a tightrope. I get the sense in this conversation, it's a real tightrope to be open, honest, vulnerable, but also maintain a place of strength and leadership.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't know. This is something I've learned kind of sometimes even the hard way. It's like communication's so important because what you think you're intending to say, for example, we're going to do our all hands, and I guarantee you it'll be heard 4 different ways by 4 different people today, no matter how tight I try to keep the messaging. So one person may think vulnerability is a sign of, hey, if you describe your shortcomings, then okay, that person might be weaker. Most people I think today don't really see that, but then other people might see the strength. I'm at a point where I'm not at a point where I'm just going to be a goofball and just be like, it is what I am, who I am, and and be rigid on things. That said, I'm kind of at a point in my life where I'm comfortable with how I lead, and so there is risk when you're transparent. And I'm not even going to feign that I'm so overly like these guys know everything, because I'm sure some of my teammates would be like, "Gosh, I really wish I knew more about our strategy." We try to be very open and transparent with what we can share. I think we promulgate a lot of information. Some would probably even want more, but there's a risk when you're transparent that, you don't have a good person on your team, or they just talk too much, even innocently, that they don't know. So there's definite risks to being vulnerable, honest, transparent, that I don't begrudge some of my colleagues who don't say, who keep a lot of their team in the blind, and their teams don't like it, but then, they often don't have any, leaky ship type issues either, right? And we haven't either here, but it's something I impart, like this, the trust. Like if we're gonna share stuff and personally be vulnerable, how people talk about me behind my back, I don't, or that I don't know, and we'd all like to think we don't care, but no one wants that. But I think for me, I do try to keep blinders, since I've been a CEO for 10 years now, and as a public company CEO, is just not seek out that kind of stuff too, because I think the negative stuff might not be great for you. Mm-hmm. But I think I may be getting off topic on this, but I would just say, it's I wouldn't say that I was vulnerable 10 or 11 years ago, and then I took I went to give them a little plug here, even though I'm not in the group anymore in the last 5 years, but a group called Vistage, and they really teach you about, for CEOs, it's important that your team see your human side, and it's all about coming authentically, coming forth authentically, which I've always kind of been that way in my life. So,
So just really appreciate the honesty, as I already acknowledged, and the vulnerability here. Just our final question that we ask all of our guests, Mark, is and maybe it comes from something we've already talked about, and that is, if you could plant the seed in the minds of every life science CEO across the globe that they're going to have with somebody, maybe internal or external, in the next week, what's that one conversation?
If I could say it a different way, sorry. If I could plant the seed
seed in the mind of, okay, it's a magical wand moment, and they're going to have one conversation over the next week with their team, with the investment community, with their board. Again, you get to decide who they're going to have this conversation with. What's that one conversation you want them to have over the next week?
Yeah, I would say, how do we how do we get treatment? I'll be very specific to what we do. It's like, how do we help patients that we serve? If we're in this business, how do we help people get better, affordable care faster, so that it really benefits everybody? It just doesn't benefit, a big company or a select few. How can we make, things accessible at the local level where it's done inexpensively and it's done quick? And I think that's where actually ChromaCode comes in. I think we're trying to solve those problems, be as comprehensive as possible while being fast and affordable. And so I think if that's what the leaders are having in the diagnostic space, it'll tie to the biotech, the therapeutics, because they'll want to be able to get treatments on biomarkers that we can get more targeted fashion, so we can preclude unnecessary, toxic therapies, right? So it really applies to almost any aspect of the business that I live in, which is diagnostic healthcare software. And for software, it's how do we, continue to make things easy to take something from sample to report, which again is a plug for ChromaCode. We do really, really well. We can take something from sample to report to basically fuel the digital PCR ecosystem. And so yeah, that's that. And like we discussed on the investor front, I think all of us in the life sciences said, how do we make sure that we restore confidence so that we can get appropriate investment into the space? Because it's not going to go away. It's just picking and choosing where it goes, right? So
yeah. Awesome. Well, you've talked a bit about ChromaCode throughout our conversation. Just want to give you a space to, like, I'll puff your chest out, but just tell us more about what would you love us to know about ChromaCode that you haven't already shared?
Yeah, so it's a really cool company that was incubated by our founder, Aditya Rajagopal, out of Caltech. And Caltech is, kind of speaks for itself as one of the leading, if not the leading incubator of, new technologies and companies here in Southern California, but for the world. So that's great that we have kind of that cachet, if you will, of a Caltech founded company. And we pivoted to genomics a year ago. We've got things I'd like you to know, or we've got a really strong team. Our software team is second to none. We've got leadership, commercial leadership in genomics with deep expertise that so we know the markets we're pursuing. We understand the regulatory and reimbursement. I won't call them hurdles or challenges, because they're steps. We understand those steps that we need to achieve, and we've got game plans, and we're actively working to achieve those now in both lung cancer and transplant rejection and other assays we're building. Mm-hmm. And so then we leverage our the technology that Aditya invented at Caltech, and we leverage this high definition PCR capabilities to multiplex and in a nutshell do a significant amount of higher targets per sample than PCR can do. And so what we're doing is for lung cancer and other assays is we're really bridging a gap between where single gene sequencing is just one at a time and just not comprehensive enough. Single gene testing on PCR, and then next generation sequencing, while it has a great utility as a screen, or if you're looking at 500 biomarkers, that's awesome. But for something like lung cancer, where we look at our 15 biomarkers, sequencing is too much, costs too much, takes over a week, sometimes two, requires too much tissue, and the bioinformatics on the back end is very difficult. So we really bridge this gap between single gene and next-gen sequencing for a number of applications. And so we're leveraging, our chemistry and our really awesome software on the back end to be very disruptive in this space. And look for us, now as an early adopter for institutions for our lung cancer test. And then, we're making significant headway in the coming years on other applications that we're excited about.
Awesome. Well, we'll put, for those that are interested, we'll put ChromaCode's website in the show notes. We'll put your LinkedIn profile so they can reach out or connect with you. Mark, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate everything you've brought to the call, to the conversation. So thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.